Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the first Provost Conversational Online Learning of this academic year. The Provost Conversational Online Learning feature public talks by leading experts on the future of education, not only to enhance teaching on campus, but also online. Today's speaker is Chip Paucek, co-founder and CEO of 2U. Chip founded 2U in 2008, and before that, he served as CEO of 2 companies. 2U today is the largest online program manager in the world, with over 70 partners. And Chip was kind enough to agree to come today to talk to us about 2U's vision for online education, university partnerships, and also the future of online and higher education. Please join me in welcoming Chip Paucek.
Thank you, Suleiman. So I'm honored to be with you here today in this pretty incredible place, by the way. So I'm here to talk about EdTech with a human touch. I'm Chip Paucek, co-founder and CEO of 2U. I'll take you on a little bit of journey about myself, as well as sort of the journey of 2U and our perspective about online ed. So where I start is a bit unexpected. So higher education is the single best path of social mobility ever invented, and I am a personal example of it. So very proud to tell you a little bit about my background. So I grew up in South Florida, not far from Miami, and grew up from 2 incredible parents, Ed and Ellie Paucek, who I get my entrepreneurial spirit from my dad and my drive from my mom, but not a ton of resources. And I was fortunate enough to get a full tuition scholarship to attend George Washington University and got a Pell Grant and paid for the rest in loans. And I would tell you it's impossible to overstate what it did for me as a human being. So it completely changed my life in every way, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. The reason I start with this image is I'd been out of Florida twice in my life until I arrived at GW. And very early on there, all of a sudden, small little particles of ice started falling from the sky. And it's a perfect metaphor for what GW did for me. So the power of snow, I'd never seen snow before. I didn't own a winter coat until I got to GW. I bought one at a downtown department store called Hex that is no longer there. It was a London fog parka, I will never forget it. And for me, it just completely blew my mind, having never seen snow before. And all of a sudden, I'm 4 blocks from the White House. My freshman dorm was 4 blocks from the White House. I met incredible people. I was taught by incredible faculty. I got great internships, and it literally changed my world. I like to think that it opened my world to the world, and more than any other reason, that is why I love what I do, and I love 2U, and the rest of my career has really been about education. Now, most importantly, my sophomore year of college, I'm smart enough in my life to know that I've done very well here. My wife Gabby, I met sophomore year, and we are still together 29 years later. It's impossible to overstate what this experience did for me. Now, my boys on the right-hand side, they're big Marvel fans, and they've caught wind of this presentation, and my oldest son Noah jokes that, Dad, if you or Mom didn't go to GW, it'd be like Thanos, and he'd snap, and we would just feather away. I don't know if you've seen Marvel Endgame. Has anyone seen Endgame? No. So for the Marvel nerds in the room, that's a pretty good analogy. But obviously we both met at GW, and then we produced these 2 kids. And it really is, for me, a story of education being not only important to me, but threaded through my entire career. So I would tell you that I left GW as a liberal arts major, and I started a company that produced a PBS television show, and it was called Standard Deviants. It was middle school, high school, college courses taught by comedians and actors, and the show did very well, but ultimately the business didn't do as well. I ran it for a decade, sort of had the exact opposite story of 2U, but once again, all about education. We thought that bringing humor to the academics would really improve the experience. And then with a brief stint running a re-election campaign of a US Senator, that's why Barbara Mikulski is there, I then became CEO of Hooked on Phonics. Yes, that Hooked on Phonics, it worked for me. And so around that time at Hooked on Phonics, we then landed on the idea for 2U. At the time in 2008, online degrees had started popping up all over the place. And we really felt that the online environment was ready for something incredibly high quality. But we thought, where are the great schools? Why were the great schools on the sidelines? We didn't understand why the internet was left to schools that we weren't attending. Why would the great institutions like a Columbia, or at the time a school like Chapel Hill or Georgetown, sort of stay on the sidelines? We really believed the world was ready for something that was great. And that was the original premise behind founding the company. And the reason I show you this grid is many of our partners are now represented on this slide. And if you look at the history of higher education, one has to sort of back up and think about the institutions like you are at today. Incredible places where you've got this dynamic occurring of freedom of thought and an open environment for learning in a way that I really do believe creates the right opportunity for somebody like me, that kid from Florida, to have a life-changing experience. And the age of these institutions is, let's focus on that for a moment. So let's talk a little bit about Oxford. So that's one of our partners in our short course business. Now, this is a little extreme, right? 1096. You're talking about one of the oldest institutions of any kind in human civilization, right? So you're talking about like the church and Oxford. Pretty powerful. Now let's talk about companies like 2U. We've existed for 12 years. If you go back 20 years and you look at the top companies in the world, 20 years ago, the top 10 are all different than they are today. Companies don't last this long. So let's talk a little bit about brands. Now, before we talk about Coke, I would tell you that, in my opinion, the word brand is actually about a relationship more than anything else. The great brands in the world have great relationships with people. Now, Coca-Cola was founded in 1886. Coca-Cola is generally perceived to be one of the best brands in the world. Many people say it's the second best known English language word in the world. Hello and then Coke. Now, two of our partners, so our first three schools that we launched, two of them were Georgetown and Chapel Hill. They were founded in 1789. Columbia was founded in 1754. Now think about that. So you have 150 years on Coke. But more importantly, people don't go to the Coke factory to get married. People don't form permanent bonds with the Coke brand. The institutions that we work with form permanent bonds with the people that participate in that community. And it's my opinion that the history of online education is a vast underestimation of the power of people. And people are threaded all throughout our story, whether it be the students or the faculty or the live classes. And so we built the company on this premise. Now, the reason I go to this slide is when you talk about my experience at GW, or an undergrad's experience here, or a grad student's experience here, people talk about disrupt, disrupt, disrupt. Let's disrupt it all. Let's disrupt everything. Let's disrupt all day long. The reality is my experience at GW, would I want that experience to be fundamentally disrupted? Of course not. Do I want to offer that access to a greater group of people in the world? Of course I do. And what you want to try to do is marry both of them. And the reason I start here is, in the beginning, it was really hard to convince people to make the transition. Schools were very, very worried about going online. And I had one of our great provosts explain it to me this way, and I thought it was super eloquent. People say it's fear of change. People say we're stuck in the mud. People say we don't want to change. And he said to me, it's not fear of change, it's fear of loss. It's fear of identity loss. We've done something exceptionally well for a really long time. And what we need to do is figure out how to embrace this modality and take the best of what we do and improve upon it. And what we learned is when you can galvanize the will of the institution, the story of 2U is the story of institutional will more than any other factor. We've been able to work across an institution to drive great faculty, to drive great experiences for students, embracing the online environment in a way that I think wouldn't be obvious. And I love this notion of fear of loss instead of fear of change. So this is when 2U was born. And the idea at the time was to build the world's best online degree programs. I would say, ultimately, building them through weekly live classes. Now, higher education institutions are some of the greatest institutions in the world. While Oxford was founded a long time ago, today the future of education is driving the future of work. And it's our belief that embracing the online environment without sacrificing anything is about embracing the people behind the system. in every way possible. So the schools needed a partner to show them the path on a go-forward basis. And that was the birth of 2U, was working with a great school to sort of unleash the university from its physical boundaries while embracing everything that we thought the great university represented. In the early days, I would run around our campuses with that early iPhone, taking photos of things that were happening at the university and sending it to my team to say, we have to figure out how to bring this online. Because the magic of the community occurring on campus, the people that are on campus are spoiled. They don't realize how much is happening here on a consistent basis, like this lecture series that I'm in right now, that is special. And it's a community of people that come together, and what you produce in the student is what I experienced ultimately at George Washington. Now, if I thread it forward a little bit longer, so you heard me mention that I am a first-generation college student. I was a liberal arts major. And I had run 3 companies at the point of this photo, but had never taken a single business course. I had read balance sheets for years, but I had never built one. I had talked to my data science team about a regression, but I had never made one. And I became obsessed with this idea of becoming an MBA student at one of our programs, and that was University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Took some time to convince my wife and my board that I was not insane, but I succeeded there, and I applied, and I was admitted, fortunately, and I became a student in our MBA program. Now, I would tell you, I didn't do it to eat my own dog food. I didn't do it for the Hair Club for Men Effect. I didn't do it to do press on it. I was too worried that I was going to fail, candidly, so we didn't do any press on it. The dean there jokes with me that I was the longest standing student in the history of Keenan Flagler Business School, because it took me 4.5 years to graduate, but I graduated, and that is me with my family on a day I will never forget when I became a Tar Heel. And I would say the power of the up-close and personal education, the power of the people-driven education, I experienced firsthand. Now I know that this can sound self-serving because it's our program, but the intimacy and not becoming a 1 and a 0, becoming a Tar Heel, that really matters. I met great people. I was taught by great instructors that I'm still in touch with. And ultimately, I became part of this community in a very fundamental way. I bleed the Carolina blue because of this program. And I believe online education done right not only creates the learning, but creates those types of bonds. Unfortunately, we were able to successfully execute an IPO while I was in the MBA program, so that is the one leave of absence I had to take from the program, but they gave me a hall pass for that one. Today, 2U has gone from 4 university partners way back in the day to 71. We partner with 71 institutions all over the world, and we take it very seriously that we are brand stewards for some of the best brands on the planet. Offering a variety of services to the university to allow them to not only make the transition, but to thrive in the online environment. So we started focused on the world's best online degree programs. So we originally had only online degrees. We were pretty obsessed with getting that right, and it was very hard in the beginning. It's still hard today. This is a challenging business to run, and I'll explain the pieces of the business as I go through the presentation. Now, over time, we expanded the offering based on the needs of both the learner and the university partner. And so we've gradually moved into professional certificates that are non-Title IV, boot camps through an acquisition of a great company called Trilogy Education that does work with Columbia and is how I ended up in a conversation here at Columbia today, and our short course business. We have about 700 of our 4,000 employees based in Cape Town, South Africa, building short courses with some of the best universities in the world, including schools like MIT and Cambridge and Oxford. So how do we do it? We talk about 2UOS, a proprietary operating system to build, deliver, and support the world's best online education at scale. So you heard me mention the people, the platform, and the data are important. We consider ourselves a partner, not a platform. So this isn't about 2U, it's about a great school like a Columbia or MIT, and building a bespoke experience for that university to thrive in this environment. And if you take a step down into 2UOS, there are 13 components. They're not accidental. They're here purposefully because we built deep expertise in each one of these individual components, and we deliver it for the university partner. Now, some are super obvious, like the learning tech. You obviously have to have a learning platform in order to drive the online experience. Some would be less obvious. Let me pick one for you. Privacy. So our privacy practice is run by a woman named Katie Ray-Sprin, who was the Chief Privacy Officer at the Federal Trade Commission before she came to 2U. Privacy is rapidly changing. The GDPR law in Great Britain has had a huge impact on the world, and just a couple of months ago, California passed a law called the CCPA that will have a major impact on how we communicate with people and how we market to people. So our privacy practice is a huge part of what we do for our clients to be able to operate in this environment. The career curriculum continuum, let's talk about this for a moment. This is how we believe over time the university needs to evolve. So this is a construct for sustainability for the university. You can think about it as a product strategy, but we believe it centers the university in the lifelong learning of a student. It's now not just about getting a degree. The learner will access a variety of different products along the continuum, and I'll show you how the learner will access them in a moment. We start with short courses. What is a short course? It's a 6 to 8 week course to stand out from the crowd, to learn how to apply blockchain or AI or something like construction management in your career for a learner. We obviously have had a long history with graduate degrees. We announced our first undergraduate degree a short time ago, and I will talk about that in a moment. And in between, we have stacks of short courses, professional certificates, and technical boot camps. We believe the boot camp format, where you're reskilling somebody for the workforce of the future, we think is hyper relevant not just for technical subjects, but over time for some non-technical subjects as well. Students won't experience this way. You can think about, if you look at the y-axis and the x-axis, the credential or the intensity of that credential. And on the x-axis, you can think about the time to complete, the length of a program. And it's a nice way to diagram what we offer with our university partners. A learner will experience it totally differently depending on where the learner is in their life. So if you think about career, the life of the student from an educational perspective, curriculum, the university's central role in that student's life, we believe. We believe the university should maintain its central role in the training of the workforce long term, even with the rapid evolution of the needs of the learner. And then continuum is the product offering that universities may offer to supply the needs. Now, a student may experience it like I did, get an undergrad degree and get a grad degree. But more and more what we'd find is post-high school, maybe somebody experiments with a short course. Maybe they take a boot camp to become a coder and eventually return to a degree offering. And I think depending on the learner, depending on where they are in the world and their needs, they will experience the continuum in different ways. If you look across the portfolio, our short course business to start with. I was just in South Africa last week. It's far, by the way. It's lovely, but it's a long ways away. And we celebrated the 100,000th learner in our short course business. And what I'm most proud of in this business is the bottom left, the completion rate in the short course business, because it's a people-mediated business once again. It's a highly intimate form of short course where you're engaged with people throughout the process. We're talking about completion rates that you typically don't see in short form content. So we think these will not only allow people to stand out from the crowd by learning a skill, but also be done on a global basis. So you're talking about 188 different countries, students accessing our short courses. And we move on to our trilogy boot camps like we see here at Columbia. So over 20,000 students enrolled in these boot camps. And what we're most proud of here is not only the completion rates, but the job placement rates. And what I featured on the slide is the diversity that we're bringing into the tech field. Technology desperately needs an improvement in diversity metrics, and the trilogy boot camps are proving to not only be great ways of retraining people to become a full stack web developer or a data scientist, but also increasing diversity And I would say 2U as a company is pretty focused on diversity, so I'm proud to tell you as a public company that we have one of the most diverse boards on the entire NASDAQ, 4 people of color and 4 women. If we move on to our degree business, so this is our legacy business where we've been around the longest. Over 50,000 registered students. I'll call your attention to the top right of the slide. 601,000 live classes inception to date. So we are offering weekly live classes at a scale that we don't think anyone else in the industry is doing. Those live classes tend to be very small, so an average class size of 15 students across the portfolio. Retention rates that are equal to campus-based programs. The 82 to 84% retention since we started the company is really a product of the intimacy and the engagement of the people in the system. The reason that retention rate is strong is we operate in many different disciplines that typically suffer from lower retention on campus also. So programs that have clinical placements typically have lower retention than an MBA program, as an example. And our portfolio, 55% of our programs have a clinical placement experience of some kind. So this is, each dot is a clinical site that 2U operates. So we have today contracts with over 47,000 local agencies. Why? Well, when we started the company, we had no intention of becoming a clinical placement shop. We were trying to build the world's best online degrees. Well, guess what? We happened to start with teaching, social work, nursing, and business. 3 of those 4 have something that happens in the field. And so we had to figure out how to drive field placement for the university, find a preceptor to put with the student, have it all approved by the faculty, the field faculty for each of these, and drive a really high quality experience. And you can't do that purely over the web. So one of our first programs was a midwifery program at Georgetown. Well, you wouldn't want to go to the midwife that delivered the virtual baby. So we had to figure out how to drive a clinical placement expertise for Georgetown in the midwifery program. Today, what's pretty crazy about this slide is not the 47,000 agencies under contract. The total number of clinical hours of students inception to date is 13 million. 13 million hours of clinical time where somebody is in the field and in a social work program dealing with somebody that came back from the war with PTSD, or in a speech therapy program dealing with a child with a speech impediment of some kind. And we feel like the power of it is the local nature of what is happening. So students have not picked up their life, quit their job, and moved to attend these programs. They are in their local community doing it. And in disciplines where there is typically a shortage in that local area. And so we think it's a very powerful example of the student winning, the university winning, and ultimately the country winning, because you're supplying the shortage in each of these particular disciplines. So let's dig into one a little bit. You heard me mention midwifery. So the midwifery program has a couple of additional challenges to the clinical placements. It's not just that the student assists in the delivery, which they do. So in the program, the faculty don't want to say that the student delivers the babies. The student assists in the delivery of the babies. But you have to assist in the delivery of 30 in order to graduate. So not only do we have to find a place to deliver the baby, but we have to find a high volume birthing center effectively. And a pretty neat stat is inception to date, we're just shy of 10,000 babies delivered in the Georgetown midwifery program. So today it's about 9,370 babies, and obviously continually mounting. But it's not just about the stats, it's about the people. So in this discipline, they have a practice of creating a yarn bracelet for each individual student. Now, what you see in this photo is on the right is a preceptor, and on the left is a student who is assisted in the delivery of their first baby. And once they do, they have a ceremony where they cut the yarn bracelet to represent that student moving on at that sort of critical part of their journey. If I continue on in the story of clinical-based programs, this one is a bit of a humdinger. So we came up with the idea of doing the first ever online physician assistant program. And the gentleman on the far right, bottom right, is a program director named Jim Van Ree. Now we have a guiding principle at 2U. We have 9 guiding principles. One of them is don't let the skeptic win. That happens to be my favorite one. No is easy. Getting to a smart yes is hard. And Jim represents that better than most. So Jim believed that we could do something really high quality, but we needed to do it in a discipline where this had never been done before. And it required 11 clinical rotations. And we finally convinced Yale to go for it, and we signed our contract. And I was about to go live on CNN, and that day the accreditor denied the program. So that was an unexpected moment and not a great day. And I'm proud to tell you that that was a couple years ago. And not only did Yale stick with it, but the accreditor, to give the accreditor credit, put us through the paces in terms of, put the program through the paces in terms of trying to make sure that it was high quality and ultimately approve the program. To get it approved, we had to build a bunch of courses. And probably more importantly, we had to do clinical placements up front. And they asked for 400 sites pre-approved, and we found 2,000. And so ultimately, the program was approved. This might be my favorite photo in 12 years of 2U. So this is a story of the 47 people in the first cohort. And this is something they do in this program where they award their white coats. So they flew from all over the country and went to Yale and were given their white coats. And the smiles on their faces is why I go to work. Like, that is what 2U is about. That is what this story is about. These 47 people are going into a discipline that will ultimately change their life. There's a huge shortage in this discipline. So my son, my youngest, who you saw earlier in the photo, he tore his ACL twice in the same knee over the past year. Well, it's 2 years ago now. And so I don't tell you this to give you my medical history. It's that my son, if you've been in the hospital all lately, and unfortunately I've been in the hospital a fair amount with my son, you interact with the PAs even more than you do the doctors. The PAs are critical to the running of the hospital. So it's a great opportunity for somebody to change their life. And these 47 people, and now a much larger number, are in this program having their life changed because of the collective efforts of Jim Van Ree, his faculty, the Yale institution, and our team. And ultimately, to me, that's what this story is about more than any other thing. Very different program. This is the Harvard Business Analytics program. This is our first professional certificate program. It's a non-Title IV program, no federal financial aid. It is targeted directly at an older audience, people that are farther along in their career, to reskill them in business analytics, a field that ultimately will drive not only many jobs, but people will be required to have new skills to be able to either stay employed or rise up in their firms. So we launched this, and it required a bunch of new things for 2U. It required much larger class sizes, a different construct. We integrated a bunch of different components from a technology standpoint. But ultimately, Harvard became convinced that it would be very high quality, but wasn't really sure that it would resonate with the consumer. And I'm proud to tell you that we now have over 600 students in the program. And probably most importantly, it worked as we believed it would. The average work experience of the people in the program is 17 years. So that kind of blew us away. So what's going on next for 2U? Well, we're talking about access, quality, and innovation. So let me start first on the innovation side. The acquisition of Trilogy allows us to expand into technical training in a big way. Technical training, with the strong exception of schools like Columbia Engineering, is very difficult for most universities to do. It's rapidly changing. It requires an interface with industry for you to know how to continue to build the type of program that will help a student thrive in their career once they're actually in the technical field. And so we'll start by building our first 5 technical short courses. Our short course library is large, 139 courses, but while we are teaching a technical subject, we are not teaching to actually build the technical subject. And today, we will now launch our first 5 technical short courses with great schools like University of Cape Town and MIT. But what this slide features is, for the first time, we embedded a technical course directly into one of our MBA programs. The program I attended is now built Python directly into the MBA program. Now, what's pretty neat about it is when we did this, we thought, okay, this is a way to future-proof the degree on some level. But ultimately, we weren't entirely sure how the student body would respond. Well, this program was launched, and when registration opened, the program sold out, the course sold out in an hour. We had never had that happen before. We had never seen sort of that level of demand on a course in any of our degree programs. So clearly, it's something that the students are looking for. Let's talk a little bit about access, bending back the cost curve. First place to start is that 2U works with most of our programs are priced at the campus level. Now, a way to think about that is from a debt burden standpoint, the largest cost to graduate education is the opportunity cost. Leaving your job for 2 years, no matter what you were making in that job, has a very high expense load and therefore increases the debt burden of the student. Well, most of our students stay employed. So it's always been that way since the beginning of 2U. But more and more, we think our scale will allow us to help pull back the cost curve in a way that's very tangible. So the first place is scholarships. We'll deploy about $20 million worth of scholarships across the portfolio to the student body. Second place is we recently announced a pretty big initiative for 2U. It's called the Deferred Tuition Plan. So in the programs that participate across our portfolio, starting with our Simmons Advanced Practice Nursing program, Simmons University in Boston, offers students the ability to defer 50% of their tuition until two things happen. One is they graduate, and two is they're in a job that pays a certain level. And so at no interest, so an interest-free loan. So this is not to be confused with an income share agreement. In most income share agreements, there's a multiplier effect, where if the tuition bill was $10,000, when the student ultimately pays it off, it might be a 2x or a 3x multiplier. And that's how those programs operate. In this case, because of our scale, we're able to offer it at zero interest. And there's no strings here. There isn't some shell game going on. We really believe that this is something that could improve access across graduate education. Our nursing program is where it starts. And the second place, we are hopeful in the next couple of weeks, we will announce our first MBA program to offer interest-free deferred tuition. And what I love about it more than anything else is that it aligns the university with the product, with the student. So it's ultimately the university really standing behind the master's degree in terms of what it will drive for the student from a long-term employment standpoint. Up next, 2U had historically only focused on graduate education. So from a marketing perspective, I would tell you that graduate education is a big market. Undergraduate education is much, much larger. So in the US alone, about $80 billion is consumed in graduate education. But all of higher ed is $550 billion. So the lion's share of the market, and a very large market, is undergraduate education. And we'd always stayed focused on graduate education, in large part because I think I mentioned earlier that my first business didn't fare the way 2U did. And if I could put one thing from my 49-year-old self into my 22-year-old self, it would be focus. I feel like the great entrepreneurs, people don't appreciate the importance of focus in a startup. It's very difficult to make multiple business lines work. And so I had to learn that the hard way the first time, but I kind of finally figured it out with the third one. And so we stayed really focused on our core value proposition of graduate education. And over time, our university partners were asking for more. So we're pretty proud to announce about 3 weeks ago our first undergraduate program. It's with the London School of Economics and University of London. It's a 3-year Bachelor of Data Science. We will have a couple other flavors of it coming. And the reason it's on here during the access part of the presentation is the entire degree is $25,000. So for all 3 years. So we think it is broadly applicable to the world from a marketing standpoint. Now, what's interesting about LSE is LSE had this program, as is the normal case. 2U operates with a school who has a program typically up and running. We've done greenfields, like our Berkeley Data Science program didn't exist before we showed up. But most of the time, there's a great campus program that's been running, and you're trying to make the transition to the online environment. Interestingly, this program was up and running in a correspondence format, sort of very old school format. And LSE became convinced that using the 2U model, they would be able to drive engagement way up, and we agree with them. We believe that people-mediated, that human touch that I talked about earlier, could really drive much higher retention. So this program will ultimately succeed or not based on our own ability to drive retention. Now, I joke that retention is the one number to rule them all. Why? If a student typically graduates from a program at a school like Columbia, they typically have a fantastic outcome. So the data supports that. So in this program, we're putting basically our dollars behind something that we think really will be about driving access to something that is quality, that will drive retention and therefore drive the long-term outcome for the student. A couple other data points for you is in the grad business, we will be operating new disciplines. So over the last 3 weeks, we've announced our first ever pharmacy program. It's a PharmD program. It will require a very intense clinical placement, just like our PA, different from our PA program, but similar nature to the business. We have about 300 full-time people that do clinical placement. And we also just announced, so I don't have a slide for it, an architecture program with the Rochester Institute of Technology that will have a similar hands-on nature. And then the reason Columbia Engineering's logo is up on the right-hand side is that we are really excited to expand our boot camp business with new technical subjects. And we're very proud that Columbia Engineering is piloting the first FinTech boot camp, which we think is a great opportunity for both the learner and for the university. So how is 2U as a business evolving? Well, we are, in the intro from Suleiman, we are called an online program manager. When I started the company, online program management wasn't a thing. It's 12 years ago, and I do believe we've had some impact on creating a sector. And that sector tends to get a lot of attention for its business model of sharing tuition. And that business model allows us to invest in a program. And I do believe that the investment part of the business is something that doesn't get enough discussion across higher ed. And so we share tuition revenue over a really long contract. Well, 2U's in the process of offering more flexible options to our partners, not just to allow partners to co-invest and therefore lower the rev share, but also offer partners the ability to operate various programs that might not require or need that level of investment with a more flexible fee-for-service model. And that's how our business will continue to innovate. I've spent a fair amount of time talking about the people part and the education part, and I thought maybe I should hit the tech a little bit. So I've got a very short video to show you what it looks and feels like in a 2U program. So I would ask you to join me on the mission of eliminating the back row in higher education. And now I believe we open it up to questions.
Thank you, Chip, for this wonderful talk.
One way to view the whole higher education business is that the intellectual capital is owned by faculty, and that the university is in fact a distribution system by which the faculty reach students. What do you see as the potential for faculty to compete with these programs that you're suggesting by in fact going direct to learners, like for instance Khan Academy, I believe.
Sure.
So it would fall into that
we
category.
built a business on believing that the university is central, first and foremost. So we believe in the power of the institution. People want to join this community. I mean, I can't overstate it. We've proven that over the years. And obviously faculty power that experience. In some ways, we are a faculty-powered business. Now, in terms of the IP itself, while we fund the programs and therefore pay to produce the programs, the IP is owned by the university, and we allow the university to work with its faculty on how that works between the university and faculty. That is kind of above our pay grade, if that makes any sense. With that said, we believe the great universities are not only here to stay, but we're believers that we're sort of doubling down on the great university. So the combination of great faculty at a great university is clearly, in our opinion, what a student wants. They want to become an alum of Columbia. They want to be part of this community. Now, the faculty are critical to the experience. The short courses tend to be a little bit more faculty driven, and the degrees tend to be more of an institutional decision, and both are important. But ultimately, from 2U's perspective, we think you should have both. So we're not trying to create 2U courses.
Other questions? Yes?
Hi, I'm Deanna Kuhn, a faculty member across the street at Teachers College, and I was surprised that you didn't say more about how these courses get constructed. You told us very impressive completion rates, better than what I hear about most online learning.
How do we make them?
Well, yes. Is that, what makes your courses better?
I think the mic cut out, so I'll repeat the question. So how are the courses made, and what makes the actual individual course?
Do you think that you do something better to produce your excellent
I would say from a course production standpoint, the quality is pretty exceptional. We've been doing this for a long time, and it's all about working hand in glove with the faculty. So our course strategists work with the faculty to sort of envision what an online version of the course should be and how it should change. And we've had some faculty members that want to go hog wild, and they really want to completely reinvent their course. And we've learned lessons over the years that it's really not about production quality, even though I would argue the production quality is beautiful. It's not about production quality. One of the courses that I took at Carolina was really one of the most lo-fi courses in the overall degree, because the professor really just wanted to replicate the way he lectured on campus. And you know, he didn't want to use the bells and whistles. And I would tell you, it's one of the highest rated courses. And the reason is, he's brilliant, and it totally works. And so we learned, in that case, to not try to force the agenda. We want the instructor to know what they have at their disposal in terms of reinventing the particular course. And we've had that happen. An example of it at WashU Law, one of our law programs, the dean was a huge believer in the Socratic method. So we created an asynchronous version of the case method, right, of the sort of calling the students out. And the online student has to interact with other students that are recorded in a way that we think is really, really quite clever. We call it the bidirectional learning tool. School loved it. You know, sometimes a faculty member wants to replicate what they've done on campus, and sometimes that's truly brilliant. So there's a diversity to the way the courses look and feel. Different courses require different things. Our physical therapy doctorate with USC required a tremendous number of sort of highly visual, you know, courses where you're actually showing people how to do various things in physical therapy. We have studios in Washington, D.C., in Los Angeles, and in Cape Town, South Africa to accomplish all this. And a single 2U course has more video content than a season of Game of Thrones. So it's a lot of stuff. And it requires, you know, patience from the faculty member. And it's a pretty intense process. The creation of the first course, you know, I would say the early stage of the process where you're visioning the course is where the most intense work is. We have, you know, producers, and we obviously have the filming of the course, and we have the instructional designers, and we do all the graphics and everything. But the IP is really the faculty member. So it's about bringing them to life. I would say over the years we've become more convinced about what we can do to drive engagement, and we try to embed that into our thinking with the faculty member, but also have to remember at times to pull ourselves back and know that this particular faculty member has been doing this really well for a long time. And so more and more what you find is the faculty really sort of embracing. I love watching our Twitter feed because faculty are tagging very often when they're in the studio doing something. You know, and there's the interactive light boards and, you know, the bells and whistles you would see. But ultimately, it's really not about production quality or bells and whistles. It's about that IP coming from the faculty. So.
Any one thing that it is about them that gets you your time
Well, I think the combination of the asynchronous and the synchronous is really powerful. I do think the engagement goes way off the charts. A fascinating decision for every degree program is they have to decide at the beginning whether they would like to enforce attendance as part of the grade. Most graduate programs don't do that on campus because there's not a good physical way of doing it. Most faculty would really like to require attendance, so schools have to decide, and that's an interesting decision, right? Do you make them come? Well, the platform knows whether you came or not, so ultimately it's the school's call. I would tell you, having taken it, I wouldn't have succeeded without the live. I needed it. Like in doing the regression, there are just moments where I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? I needed them to interact with me. So I think the combination of the two from a pedagogy standpoint is pretty powerful.
So related to this question and
Sure.
the conversation between a company like yours and MOOC platforms that are trying to go into this space, Coursera and edX having a combined 60 million learners that they're trying to convert at least a portion of those learners into their degree programs. How do you see their ability to actually play in this space? And in particular...
You're trying to ask me the hard questions.
No, and how can these low cost or deeply discounted degree programs ensure the kind of high touch that exists in the online degree programs like the one you partner with other universities to offer?
Well, first I would say, sustainability is not optional. So somebody's got to pay for it eventually. So I do believe that right now you're seeing much more of a cost play there than the notion is the platform is driving enrollment. And we firmly believe we have enough data to support the fact that what you're actually looking at is the discount more driving enrollment than any other factor. We feel like we have good data to support that assertion. We did a variety of tests with that form of platform to see if there was a sustainable component of driving student enrollment there. Now, I would tell you from a quality standpoint, I think it's going to be a long journey, right? How we ultimately decide quality metrics related to what a degree delivers or doesn't deliver. Now, ultimately, does somebody graduate, and how does it perform for them when they graduate? When you're in a graduate program, that is what you're looking for. So an example of that, our nursing programs, we didn't really win Georgetown, the hearts and minds of Georgetown, until we got to the point where it's board pass rate time. And did you pass your board? And that is 6 months after they graduate. So we built this program and funded it and then built it together, and over a long time period have students enroll and deliver, and then had to wait 6 months until they're out and they take their first boards. And the current board pass rate across the nursing programs is in the high 90s. It's like 98.7 or something like that. So it's very high. It's just like a campus program. So I think you're going to see a conflation of pricing over time. I do think you'll see those prices have to move up over time. I do think that. And the question that you have to ask yourself also is, how is the campus program compared to the online program in a way that if it's meant to be the same thing, ultimately you've got to have a strong, sustainable operation on the online side that can't be built on the backs of the campus program. We don't believe that works long term. Now, there are other people that might present at this lecture series would have very different opinions. I believe I've been doing it long enough and I have a lot of data to support what I just said. So we do believe that these are not perfectly inelastic goods. It's really critical to pull back the cost, and the cost of higher ed definitively needs to come down. We think our scale can get there. I do think it's underappreciated about 2U that one of the things underappreciated about the way our system works is it really is a full bespoke campaign for the school, not for 2U. And I think if I'm on the university side, that would matter to me. Now, that doesn't mean we don't get the value of the network, because we obviously have a lot of learners in the 2U system overall. But ultimately, they're not becoming 2U students. What's been interesting about us is that we've rolled out recently something with LinkedIn where every student in one of our graduate programs gets LinkedIn Premium at no cost. And we were able to do that because of our scale. And that by definition helps feed the outcome, because if somebody has LinkedIn Premium, they have a greater likelihood of getting the job they want. The data proves that from LinkedIn. So LinkedIn Premium allows them to do a bunch of things on LinkedIn that you can't do if you don't have Premium. And so we want students to succeed afterwards. So ultimately, these types of initiatives from us, we think our scale is starting to matter in both an access component and a cost component. But we think the story of both quality and whether or not that is a sustainable format is very much in question. If we took our programs and deeply discounted them, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. Because, as I said, sustainability is not optional. But we are trying our best to bring down the cost as we can, as you saw me present in the deferred tuition section and in the scholarship section.
Hi there, Brian Gardner from the Business School. I was curious, it's a kind of two-part question. Would you ever go to the PhD at JD level? And would you ever go the trade apprenticeship level?
Oh, wow, trade. So PhD and JD, we have 2 JDs up and running. We have 3 or 4 doctorates, I believe. So we have several EDDs, which are doing very well for their respective schools. We have an EDD at Vanderbilt, the Peabody School of Education. We have an EDD at USC Rossier. We have an EDD at Baylor. We believe doctorate education is very relevant. Now, those are more practitioner-based doctorates. We haven't done trade education. I think the technical training is super interesting today because it's very difficult for schools to keep up, and what Trilogy has built is a very, I think, an underappreciated aspect of Trilogy, the company that we acquired, is the way the curriculum is woven between the university Trilogy and probably most importantly the field, like the companies. So the instructors are inside industry, and the feedback mechanism for sort of improving the content, there's like this continual feedback loop that's happening to improve, as you're learning Python. We think that's pretty powerful. Now, we haven't done what you would consider trades today. I learned a long time ago that I have to constrain my interest in doing everything. I think you heard me talk about that. My first company, now to be fair, my first company, it makes me sound like a dinosaur because it's all pre-web, and the business model was you put it on TV and then you sell stuff. So that's a tough model. We sold 5 million DVDs, and ultimately the company still didn't succeed. Now, one little fun data point for you is it produced a bunch of celebrities. So it was the first show for a bunch of famous people that's kind of fun. So like Kerry Washington from Scandal, it was her first show. So, but that's an aside. My point is I've learned to restrain myself from doing too many things at once. It's really hard, and as an entrepreneur, you're wired to go for it. And I joke with people that, like, if you've seen the movie Poltergeist, and Carol Ann, don't go into the light, and then she goes into the light, and then all bad stuff happens. Like, for an entrepreneur, the bright shiny object is the new thing. So we've been careful. Now, we did expand to Get Smarter. We did expand to Trilogy. We thought they were critical in terms of our framework with the career curriculum continuum. And undergrad, we're not doing anything different than we do on the grad business. So, but we're pretty consumed right now. So we're plenty full. So I don't think you'll see us expand that way quite yet.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julie from the law school. I have a follow-up question, or I guess a related question to your remarks on sustainability. It's important from a brand and a quality perspective to have full-time faculty teaching in these online courses, but do you find with your partners the difficulty in sustaining that, meaning getting the same full-time faculty member to agree to teach it every year when they have sabbaticals and other obligations, and then it's a very intense process to design these courses, and then having to put the money and cost into redesigning them every year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is.
So you covered a couple of things in the same question, and they're both right on, which is, number one, it is an intense process for faculty, and number two, you do have to keep the course up. So the courses age, and I think one of the things that will be clear over time with the MOOCs in particular is you've got an aging library of courses that is going to have to be refreshed over time without question. Now, in our model, we're continually refreshing them. That's part of our job. So there's literally a refresh budget every year to refresh the existing courses. Our original degrees, like Carolina and USC, have been rebuilt fully, the whole degree. Now, from a faculty perspective, the way the faculty modeling works in terms of the course load is definitely different by school. It is their call, just like it's the school's decision to admit students. It's the school's decision to, the reason why we say we're the subservient partner is all aspects of what an accreditor or a policymaker would want the school to control, they control. We don't make the admissions decision, we don't do financial aid, and we don't do accreditation, we don't award the degree. And so how the faculty are structured is really the university's call. Most of our schools hire full-time to monitor what is a larger group of adjunct faculty, and it totally depends on the school. Chapel Hill, interestingly, built a layer of faculty that's become quite prestigious at the school between the faculty that built the course and the instructor layer. And that's worked well, but every school's different. We have people that model all of this with the school. One of them, Nate Greeno, happens to be standing in the room back there, that work with the school to define the structure. And we can, we have a lot of experience, so we can give you, this is the way this has been done or this has been done, but it's kind of your call. Each of those decisions has a financial impact, just like anything else. So we fully model both the school side and our side. That's part of what we do in the process. We've seen it work a bunch of different ways. I mean, the Harvard Business Analytics program has a very large class size, and it's doing really well. So that's teaching us some things. So having the class size go up is probably better for the sustainability of the programs. Now I'll tell you, in my classes, there's one famous screenshot of one of my classes because I know these people very well, but one of my classmates in San Francisco is now engaged to one of my classmates that was in Carolina on the live session, and Business Week did a story on it because they were, they met in the classroom. So my board joked with me, don't start a dating service. I'm like, no, we're staying focused here. But people really do form real relationships, so the intimacy of the live class, I think, is useful. I know many of my faculty members, because the classes were so small that you kind of know what's going on in your life. It's the one funny thing when people show up for the immersions for the first time is they say the one thing you can't tell on the platform is how tall somebody is. So it's like, I walked up to one of my classmates who was a professional basketball player, and she was extremely tall. And I was like, oh my God, you're very big. And it just depends on that's the one thing you can't tell, but you really get to know each other. So I like that personal aspect of it. I think it's pretty powerful.
Just building on this, in addition to live classes, what other tools do you use to help foster community within these online programs?
The immersions are pretty powerful. We obviously have digital tools like LinkedIn, but the immersions, so all of our programs have some kind of hybrid experience that we also power where students come, and in the nursing programs there's a thing called OCIs that are super intense, and there's a robot that pees and bleeds and goes into cardiac arrest and does all kinds of things, and they are tested by the faculty during these sessions. In our business programs or our data science programs, they do immersions where they physically come, and we knew we were onto something very early on before we did immersions. The first graduation for our USC program in teaching, a higher percentage of the online students flew to walk than the campus students. So we knew we were onto something early on. So we started building these immersive experiences, and it's crazy. It's super powerful. They're heavily attended. The last one that I went to at Carolina, they had to have the dinner on the floor of the Dean Dome because it was big. And so you've got all these students coming from all over the place, dripped in their Carolina blue, and that's part of the experience. So that community does really matter. Now, I would say, ultimately, it's the school. We can power these things, but people aren't coming because 2U's setting up a nice event. They're coming because of what I said earlier about the power of the institution. You can't beat it. It's a remarkable collection of people, and people matter. So I feel like figuring out how to bring them together, there are digital things you can do. One of our programs has a happy hour on the platform. There's all kinds of things that you can do to foster the community, but it's about them meeting them. And I feel like if you just engage the people, it's pretty kind of magical what happens.
Question here.
Thank you. My name is Josh DiVincenzo. I'm with the Earth Institute and Teachers College. Right now, I'm helping to teach a class on online learning and teaching. preparing the next generations of teachers and future faculty. What are some pieces of advice you'd have on how to prepare these instructors to form into this 2U model?
So the teaching program was our first program and put us through all kinds of challenges. And one of the things that was fascinating is having the student teachers record themselves when they were doing their student teaching. And instead of, what might happen in a campus program is they go out and do their student teaching, they come back and they talk about it as a group. And what the online environment allows you to do is, obviously with correct permissions, legally you have to be covered, but allows you to film yourself teaching. And then instead of the assignment being that you're talking about each other, you're actually watching each other do the teaching and the critiques of the fellow students. So that bidirectional learning tool that we created for WashU, we now have these threaded discussions of the video threads where people are posting their own student teaching in a way that I think creates a dialogue for student teachers that is incredible. So interestingly, when Rossier was going through, the Rossier School of Education was going through their teaching accreditation, I believe it's NCAID, I believe. I forget what the accreditor is, we have a lot of programs now. The accreditor requested whether or not they could see the video, which is fascinating. And so we had to collect all of the video to give to the accreditors. They could actually see the power of the students teaching in the classroom, which we thought was pretty cool because we don't think anybody could really do that because you're not live online. We have experts in that program that I would love to connect you to. I know enough to be high level, but I'd be happy to connect you to them if you'd like to do a deeper dive. We have multiple teaching programs at this point, so doing a lot with Baylor, doing a lot with Fordham here locally.
Another question here.
Noel Cave, I'm from the business school. I have a somewhat different sort of question. Some people would say that university administrations are highly bureaucratic and very slow to make decisions and very difficult to innovate. Could you say something about the process of persuading an institution like
we don't have enough time
or these others to sign on to your program?
It's very complicated. I would say, the part of the value of the university is that there's a freedom of thought. There's there's not a single decision maker. As a public company, we have an annual thing we do with shareholders where they come and we talk about what's going on at the company. We don't do it every year, but and at our last investor day, I was honored to have the Chancellor of Syracuse came to present. Because I asked him to. He's a big advocate of what we've done at Syracuse, and Ken Severud said, he's something like this. It said, being Chancellor of Syracuse is like being President of the European Union. And I thought that was a wonderful description of the complicated sort of structure. They're very large organizations with, power is, there's a lot of influence and not always a lot of direct control. And we have to have everybody on board to do a large scale 2U deployment with a full degree program. We have to have the provost or the president, we have to have the dean, and we have to have the faculty. Can't do it without all three. So I would say we've learned a long time ago that we start at the school level in part because if the faculty aren't on board, it doesn't matter. So the faculty really have to be on board. Most of our processes have had faculty votes. So almost all of them. So it's a nail-biting moment where we put 2 years into something. I see Nate nodding his head. Put 2 years into something and it's going to the faculty for a vote, and here you go. And we've had some not go the right way for us. So it's a heck of a process. But ultimately, we've learned also that we want our schools to do faculty votes. So that buy-in is pretty critical to how the program will operate long-term, regardless of whether or not that individual person that might be voting is involved. But the way the schools operate, it is better for the long-term health of the program to have everybody bought in. And obviously it's a business negotiation as well. The financials are a big part of it, but they're complicated. They've gotten easier, by the way. In the beginning, we had one of the schools did a sit-in to prevent the school from opening because the school was so worked up about that we were doing this. So it's gotten less controversial. So that's a win. We've exhausted the questions.
Well, I do have a long list of questions that we have not yet addressed, but maybe to close this conversation, where do you see the future of higher education, online education in 5 to 10 years, and where do you see 2U in that?
Well, I would say, the entire notion of online education, all of it is becoming a hybrid experience in some form, and I think the pace of that will pick up. We don't believe the campus goes away. We believe the campus is pretty critical, not just as a centering force, but it is a community of people, and anyone that has any community organization of any kind, there's typically a galvanizing place that the community comes together and people want to be here. With that said, we think the entire experience does over time go much more hybrid. The fascinating experience about our undergrad program, we have one undergrad program that we ran a long time ago that, for those that are in the world of online ed, might remember, right when the MOOCs were sort of springing up, we came up with this idea called Semester Online, and it was deploying our model for classes in undergrad with great schools. It was 10 great schools. It was a consortium of great schools. And people said it would fail, and they were right, but for the wrong reasons. People said the students wouldn't like it. People said the faculty wouldn't like it. Both of that was totally wrong. Students and faculty loved it. Ultimately, what we found is that the consumer wanted to purchase online programs from the school they were at, not from a school they weren't at. And so the whole vision of Semester Online was, you're here at Columbia and you might be able to take a Duke course or take a Wash U course. And what we found, the reason I tell that story in terms of the future is, what's interesting about it is, we ran those for a very long time at no expense to the school because we'd shut the program down and we felt like the right thing was just to allow them to keep running, and we didn't charge for it. And they kept running much longer than we thought, and they were in high demand from the current student body. So students on the campus want to take more and more hybrid or online experiences. So I think if you look out, not 10 years, it's going to happen pretty fast. The internet is obviously the internet, it's here. And so embracing it more at the core of the institution, one of the reasons we're expanding into helping our schools with their campus programs is because of that question. Now, where 2U will be, I feel very blessed to be here. I've been doing it 12 years. I started it, I IPO'd it, I'm still here. And the reason that I still love it is that we really ultimately are having a huge impact on people's lives. And I think figuring out how to drive that impact is what drives our employees and me. And so I think if we just remember the simple premise of, if the student wins, the university wins, we win, we will continue to find more and more ways to help our partners do what they need to do to center the university in the life of the student. The last two things we did with our short courses and our boot camps, we do think expands the aperture of the company in a way that, potentially we should be able to be one of the most important companies in the world for higher education. Higher education, what's weird about higher ed is if you look at the percent of GDP consumed by higher ed and you compare it to other sectors, it's right up there with retail. And then you look at the top companies, and the top companies by market cap, you of course know technology, Apple, you of course know retail, Amazon, and then you get to education and it's Pearson at 7 billion. It's not compared to Apple at 800. And so we think that there's a very large opportunity ahead for companies that figure out how to operate this. But to your question, it's a complicated operating environment. So I feel like we've got the opportunity, having at least cracked some portion of the code, to continue to expand our business.
Thank you very much, Chip, for this wonderful talk. Thanks to all of you for coming to this Provost Conversation on Online Learning. Please join me in thanking our guests today.